Hello everyone, tonight we are standing in a twilight swamp where the air is thick. The ferns are taller than you and the shadows ripple like nervous fish. Something's watching you from the underbrush. You can't see it yet, but it's not hunting you. It's watching because it remembers. This is a place where minds bent sideways. Not yours, at least not yet, but those of creatures so enormous they made trees nervous. Some of them ate something they really shouldn't have. And what happened after, well, you probably won't survive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and the local time where you're watching this. I want to see who else is lost in time with us tonight. Now turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise and let's get started tonight. You shuffle forward, toes half sunk in soft prehistoric peat, and the breath of the jungle is thick with earthy sweetness and old spores. You're alone for now. The canopy leans in close above, knitted tight with vines that have no flowers but plenty of attitude. You're standing in the late Cretaceous about 75 million years ago, and you can feel the difference in your lungs. The oxygen is richer, the air feels stranger, and the plants, oh, the plants are not just alive, they're expressive, curled, frilled, veined, some of them almost seem to listen. In the center of the clearing, your gaze locks on a tall frond, serrated and bright with unnatural color. It catches the sun just right, and for a moment you swear it shivers without the wind. That's not normal even here. This is horsethief's fern. A name you just made up because no one alive remembers what it was really called. But it fits, because if you were a dinosaur and you ate this stuff, it wouldn't kill you. It would steal your mind one bite at a time. Scientists today call it a psychoactive cycad relative, though most of them just say unidentified flora with possibly neurotoxic qualities, which is science. Speak for, we found weird stuff in poop and hope it means something. And this one. This is the star. Its preserved spores, trapped in amber and sediment cores, contain chemical traces eerily similar to dimethyltryptamine, yes, DMT, the spirit molecule if you're feeling mystical. The bad idea if you're at a music festival with poor judgment. Historians still debate whether this plant intentionally produced such compounds to discourage being eaten, or to manipulate animals into unknowingly spreading its spores. It's a classic evolutionary arms race. Herbivores nibble plants. Plants retaliate with chemistry. Herbivores adapt plants up the ante again. But here, something strange happened. The plant didn't just fight back, it rewired the rules. You bend low, not touching it because you're smarter than a stegosaur, and listen. There's a hum beneath the wind, low and pressing, like something ancient still thrumming through its roots. Maybe you're just imagining it. Maybe you're not. You think back to those fossils of hadrosaurs with twisted limbs and skulls buried in odd angles, their final poses less like dying animals and more like confused dancers. Scientists call it postmortem contortion. But what if some of those contortions happened before they died? And here's the odd fact of the night. Modern koalas often get high on eucalyptus and then fall out of trees. You didn't expect that one, did you? They eat toxic leaves all day, process it slowly, and sometimes just drift. Maybe dinosaurs had similar afternoons. The thought makes you laugh until you remember you're surrounded by prehistoric hallucination factories. You step carefully around the fern, but the clearing doesn't end. It stretches curling outward in a lazy spiral of tall plants, half of which look like props from a low-budget alien movie. Pale fronds, dark fruit, sappy bulbs. There's no grass yet. Not really, it hasn't evolved, but ferns dominate the floor like moss that graduated with honors. Then something rustles, just once. To your left, you freeze. Your first thought predator. Your second wind. Then you see it. A small ornithopod, maybe a Parksosaurus, noses its way into the clearing. It's about the size of a big turkey with expressive eyes and a slightly manic energy like a toddler who's had too much sugar and is also a lizard. It sniffs the air, pauses, then darts forward. You watch it nibble a leaf, just one. You've read enough field guides to know what comes next. The animal stops mid-chew, head lifts, eyes go wide. Then, nothing. It stares for a long beat, then bolts into a bush. You hear thrashing, then silence. You wait. A full minute passes. Then the sound returns. Not a screech or a growl, but laughter. Yours. Because what else can you do? You just watched a dinosaur trip out of its tiny bird mind. Whatever this plant was, whatever its name is, now lost to time, it left a mark. Not just on behavior, on the fossil record, on ancient migration patterns, on extinction events, and possibly, just possibly, on the dreams of the creatures that once ruled this place. You crouch by the fern, not touching, but close enough to feel its breath. It doesn't move. It waits, like it knows it has all the time in the world. Because the dinosaurs, they're long gone. But the plants, some of them never left. The ground hums under your feet. It's not seismic, not volcanic, it's biological, deep, rooted. A kind of static that rises up from the soil and nestles just behind your ears. You don't hear it exactly. You sense it like the feeling of being watched in an empty room, or a Zoom call you forgot was still on. You're not alone anymore. On the edge of the clearing near the base of a split log riddled with moss, you catch a glimpse of something heavy. No sprinting theropod, no sneaky predator. This one walks with the slow, uncertain gait of a creature just learning to be dizzy. It's a juvenile hadrosaur, maybe a Gryposaurus. Gangly, wide-eyed, still growing into its legs. It lumbers cautiously into the clearing, sniffing the air with the kind of confidence you only have when you don't know what you don't know. Its snout twitches, its pupils dilate, and with barely a second thought it lowers its head and starts munching. The moment is quiet. Crunch, crunch, slurp, then a very long pause. You don't blink, neither does it. Then the hadrosaur stumbles. Not dramatically, not yet. Just one misstep, then another. Its limbs move like someone replaced the bones with overcooked noodles. Its head tilts, jaw slack, eyes wide and wet like it just realized it's inside a painting it doesn't understand. Then it starts to circle. Once, twice. Each loop sloppier than the last. By the fourth revolution, it's swaying, letting out low, confused grunts. The other plants don't move. The forest doesn't judge, but you do. You whisper, "Buddy, that was a mistake." And the universe answers because with a final staggering step, the hadrosaur tips sideways like a slow-falling bookshelf and collapses into the undergrowth with a crash of ferns and startled insects. It twitches, whimpers, and then like a dreamer slipping into REM, it begins to run in place. Legs kicking, tail twitching, but it's lying down. You edge closer, not too much, not stupid, but enough to observe. Its eyes roll back. Its breath is fast, shallow. It lets out a noise you've never heard from any living thing. Not a moo, not a honk, a strange hiccuping rhythm, like laughter, or fear, or both. Modern animals do this too. Horses especially are prone to similar behaviors after ingesting locoweed astragalus, a plant that contains neurotoxins messing with their cerebellum. Cows will eat it too despite the obvious side effects. They stumble, shake, hallucinate, sometimes for hours, sometimes fatally. Historians still debate whether such self-poisoning served any adaptive purpose or if it was just the ancient equivalent of licking the wrong toad and regretting all your life choices. And the question grows weirder when it's dinosaurs doing the licking. You notice something else now. The air above the fern patch is shimmering slightly. Not visually, not like heat. More like you're breathing through a veil. You blink. The hadrosaur makes a snorting hiccup and tries to stand. It doesn't succeed. Instead, it lurches to its feet in that wobbly way toddlers do, then bolts, but not away. It sprints in a crooked zigzag straight through the clearing, crashing through saplings, squealing in a pitch too high to be threatening. Birds or proto-birds scatter. Something large crashes off in the distance, and just like that, it's gone. A stillness settles over the clearing again. The ferns sway just a little as if they're clapping politely. You exhale and shake your head. It's hard to process. A creature built like a freight train just got sucker punched by a salad. You make a mental note, avoid the frilly ones. And here's your off-topic gem of the night. In 1971, NASA gave some spiders LSD to see how their webs would change. Don't ask why. The answer? They got lazy. Their webs were chaotic, disorganized. One spider never even finished. Now imagine a 2-ton dinosaur tripping this hard and trying to navigate a world of cliffs, swamps, and predators. And oh, there will be predators. Because while the hadrosaur zigzags off stage, something else watches from the tree line. You don't see it clearly yet. Just the glint of an eye, the flick of a tail, a low, slow exhale. But you know it saw the same thing you did. And you know it's smart enough to wait. Plants don't think not like animals, but they react. They adapt. The plant the hadrosaur ate isn't universally deadly. It doesn't kill you outright. It confuses you, makes you vulnerable, distracts you from the rustle in the underbrush, the sound of claws on wet bark. It's sabotage disguised as salad. You glance at the broken leaves where the juvenile fed. They're glistening, oily, slightly iridescent, and even from a safe distance they smell just a little sweet, like honey mixed with static electricity. That's the terrifying thing. It probably tasted good. And so the clearing resets. Bird calls resume. Insects hum, ferns breathe, and somewhere just beyond hearing you catch the low, hungry exhale of something bipedal. It's watching, waiting for the next diner to make the same mistake. The next course is coming, and the forest is ready. You step through the foliage like it's made of glass. The air shifts again, damp cooler, and edged with the faint sterility of stone and steel. The jungle dissolves. The buzz of insects fades into the low hum of fluorescent lighting. And suddenly, you're standing in a paleobotany lab about 75 million years and one bad grant proposal away from that hallucination buffet you just witnessed. Welcome to the present day. A group of researchers hover around a glass-top table like it's sacred. Beneath it lies a fossilized fern pressed flat between shale layers, an anonymous smear to you, but to them it's holy scripture. And scrawled across the margins of every lab notebook in sight, one word: psychotropica. That's not a joke. That's the placeholder name for the fossilized plant residue found in the gut cavities of at least 6 different herbivorous dinosaurs. Charred fragments preserved pollen, even trace amounts of secondary metabolites that don't belong to any known plant species today. You think back to the hadrosaur spinning in circles and can't help but whisper, "Found you." Now, here's the twist. Not everyone in this room agrees that what you saw, what they've been chasing, is real. The woman with the strawberry clip in her hair taps her pencil furiously. We don't even know if this is psychoactive. The chemistry's degraded. For all we know, it just smelled weird. The man with the corduroy elbows nods thoughtfully. It was probably just fermented, like dinosaur kombucha. And then there's Dr. Levin, the one who's been quiet until now. He finally says, "Except, we've modeled how the compounds could interact with dopamine receptors, avian analogs, reptilian brains. The math says it could induce hallucinatory episodes." Historians still debate whether these chemical signatures in dinosaur remains are the result of intentional ingestion or just dietary coincidence. But something about the consistency of the findings suggests a pattern. These weren't isolated accidents, they were part of an ecological dance, one we still don't fully understand. Dr. Levin clicks a remote and the screen behind him lights up with a rendering. A simulation of a dinosaur brain lighting up like a Christmas tree under the influence of the plant compounds. The room falls quiet. You lean in closer. There it is again, that shimmer. Not from the screen, from memory. The fern from the clearing. The tilt in the air. Here's the kicker. Levin continues. The same alkaloid traces trimethylated indoles have a modern analog, found in a species of fungus growing symbiotically on cycad roots, not toxic to the plant, but to the animal. He spreads his hands. Brain soup. A younger intern raises a hand sheepish. So, dinosaurs were just like tripping. A slow smirk spreads across the room. We're not saying that the lead researcher says. We're saying they might have been neurologically affected by secondary metabolites in recurring flora across a stable geographic region during peak bloom cycles. Then she grins, which is science for maybe. Even the fossil record, which usually prefers to stay cryptic, gives off hints. There are fossilized tracks that start straight and then spiral into confusion like a drunk walking through wet cement. There are predator-prey kill sites where the herbivore was obviously sick or disoriented, and no clear wounds appear before death. Something inside them broke first. And here's your odd fact for the night. During the 1950s, the CIA tested LSD on unsuspecting subjects through a project called MK Ultra. You probably knew that. What you might not know is that spiders given LSD spin webs with a wildly different geometry, and this has been used as a measure of a neurological disruption ever since. Web shape, pattern, coherence, it's all brain print. Imagine using fossilized migration patterns as a neurological map of prehistoric brain states. That's what Dr. Levin is proposing, and not everyone buys it. There's no proof they experienced consciousness as we understand it, someone scoffs. A hallucination requires a subjective self. But that's where it gets really weird. Because what if they did? What if a giant lumbering animal with a walnut-sized brain had just enough self-awareness to become confused, frightened, or enchanted? And what if the plant knew that? There's one last file on the table, a sealed amber capsule containing ancient pollen. Inside is the fossilized signature of a plant species no one has yet named. It has a spore pattern resembling some of Earth's oldest psychoactive molds, plus a chemical twist seen in only one modern plant, iboga. That's a plant used in human rituals for spiritual journeys, long trips, vision quests. You glance at the fossil, and for just a second swear it's the lighting, it looks like it's pulsing. So was the plant simply toxic? Or was it a guide, the scientists argue? The debate rages, the grant money wobbles in the balance. But outside the lab, past the glass, past the gates and the fences and the concrete, the ferns are still growing. And they are very, very patient. The jungle welcomes you back like you never left. Only now you're walking differently, watching your step, eyeing every plant like it just whispered something suspicious. You're deep in the late Cretaceous again, and this time your goal isn't to avoid predators. It's to inventory the prehistoric pharmacy. And business is booming. The understory buzzes with life. Not just dinosaurs, though you hear them snorting and crunching in the distance, but plants swaying with the quiet confidence of organisms that have survived asteroid impacts, ice ages, and amateur YouTubers. You duck under a low frond with leaves so wide you could use one as a tent. It smells sharp, almost peppery. You label it "Do Not Eat Number 7." Then you step into a small clearing and suddenly the air changes again. It's not just the humidity, though, that's thick enough to chew, it's the invisible cocktail of plant chemicals swirling around you. Terpenes, alkaloids, cyanogenic glycosides. This place is a molecular minefield with leaves, and it's not random. Everywhere you look, you see plants competing not just for light and water, but for biochemical dominance. Many of the ferns, cycads, and flowering newcomers of this era evolved elaborate chemical defenses. Some of them irritate, some sedate. A few mess with your nervous system like a bored college student with access to his dad's liquor cabinet. And here's a fun historical fact. Scientists now believe that many plant families developed psychoactive or toxic compounds long before mammals existed. These chemicals weren't just random quirks, they were tools. Defense manipulation, even communication. One ancient gymnosperm, Williamsonia, had fruiting bodies surrounded by resin-rich leaves. The resin preserved in fossils contains traces of sesquiterpenes compounds that in modern plants are known for their insecticidal and psychoactive effects. And Williamsonia wasn't rare. It was common and definitely within the bite range of medium-sized herbivores. The idea that plants used chemistry to protect themselves isn't controversial. What's up for debate is how far that manipulation went. Historians still argue whether the psychoactive compounds found in fossilized plants were enough to truly alter dinosaur behavior, or if we're projecting human responses onto brains that simply didn't work the same way. But out here surrounded by these biological tricksters, it's hard to stay skeptical, especially when you spot your next contestant. A strange, spiraled plant growing in a neat circle, like it's been arranged by a druid with anxiety. It's low to the ground with red-tipped stalks and fuzzy pods that leak a viscous amber-colored droplet. You stare at it. It stares back. You name it, nope fern. Behind it, a larger plant towers. This one looks familiar, eerily so. It's a flowering angiosperm with delicate purple blossoms. You sniff cautiously, lavender, number 2 sharp. Something closer to nightshade. You back away, but not before catching sight of a tiny lizard-like creature curled under one of its petals, twitching in what you hope is sleep. You're surrounded by chemistry now. This jungle isn't just alive, it's laced. And modern echoes of this botanical battleground are still with us. Many of today's psychoactive plants like coca, opium, poppy, and peyote descend from ancient lineages. Some even contain the same classes of alkaloids found in prehistoric counterparts. The past isn't gone. It's just photosynthesizing quietly in the corner. You remember that some primitive grasses? Yes, the ones just starting to emerge in this epoch carry ergot-like fungi that can cause hallucinations, tremors, and madness in grazing animals. Ergot is where LSD was born. The circle closes. Here's your odd fact of the night. In 2001, researchers discovered a plant in Madagascar whose leaves contain a compound almost chemically identical to a human neurotransmitter. When local lemurs eat it, they become unusually relaxed, even trance-like. The plant benefits by gaining a willing seed spreader. Sound familiar? So maybe that juvenile hadrosaur from earlier wasn't just unlucky. Maybe it was a target. Maybe the plant wanted its spores spread in a dance of confusion. You crouch again near a patch of thick-leafed undergrowth. Small teeth marks decorate the edges, not fresh, but recent enough to tell you someone ate here and survived. You brush the leaves aside and find a trail of dry dung pellets. Cracked open by time. You lean in because that's what we do now. We sniff ancient poop. And there it is. A faint resinous tang. Familiar, almost bitter. You remember the smell from the lab? This one was laced. You smile. A whisper brushes past your ear, just wind, but for a second it sounds like the plants are gossiping about you. Maybe they are. You stand and scan the trees. This jungle isn't just a forest, it's a chemical playhouse. Each leaf is a bet. Each flower a riddle. Some offer medicine, some offer madness. And some, like the one that ruined that hadrosaur's afternoon, offer both. This is the real Cretaceous drama, not claws and teeth, but molecules and minds. And you're right in the middle of it. You hear it before you see it. A slow rustling rhythmic like someone dragging a branch in wide lazy circles. You freeze. Not in fear, not yet, but in that animal way that says, I don't know if I'm the watcher or the watched. Then it emerges. not from the trees but from the plants themselves. The bloom opens first, huge, ridiculous, pink as a gossip column with petals that twitch as if they have opinions. Then the stalks move slithering not in the way snakes do, but in that silent, creepy way vines sometimes adjust overnight like they're politely plotting. But it's not the size or color that gets you. It's the smell. Sweet at first, inviting, like overripe fruit and warm rain. But then beneath it, something sharp and sour, ozone and sweat. You take a cautious step back. Too late. You've already inhaled. There's no visible cloud, no puff of smoke, but your eyes water instantly, and the edge of your vision starts to bend inward. The jungle tilts. Sounds stretch out, warping like audio playing through a rubber band, and you haven't even touched it. You stagger to a log and brace yourself, trying to breathe slow. But the image stays burned behind your eyelids, the plant's strange curling bloom, the shimmer of light around it, that undeniable sense that it knows you're here. This is the trickster bloom. At least that's what you're calling it. And you're not alone. Paleobotanists have a field nickname for its ancient ancestor, the prank orchid. Fossilized pollen from this genus was found in concentrated clusters around the skeletons of mid-sized herbivores in what is now southern Alberta. Not scattered, but densely packed, especially near the head and gut cavities. Like the plant wanted to be remembered, historians still debate whether this flower used its hallucinogenic properties to ward off predators or to manipulate its environment for better reproduction. One camp argues it attracted certain animals by inducing a kind of dazed curiosity, much like how modern pitcher plants lure insects with sweet nectar before digesting them alive. Another insists it's all coincidental, just chemical overkill from an overly enthusiastic genome. But there's one theory that refuses to go away. What if the trickster bloom wasn't defensive but offensive? What if it evolved to interfere with behavior? You hear modern biologists use terms like allelopathy when one plant chemically alters the growth or function of another. But what if this went further? What if the bloom emitted a fog that made dinosaurs walk funny, forget danger, or stumble into areas they otherwise would have avoided? Imagine a giant animal tripping out just long enough to wander 10 meters east, right where the plant's seed pods had fallen. Imagine that animal drooling and blinking, eating the pods. Imagine it walking away and depositing a nicely fertilized spore-rich poop bomb somewhere far, far away. Now, imagine that working for thousands of years. You might be starting to get the picture. Plants are not passive, they're not boring. They're the quiet schemers of the prehistoric world. And some of them, like this bloom currently fuzzing up your vision, were brilliant. Here's your odd off-topic nugget. Sea slugs sometimes steal chloroplasts from the algae they eat and use them to photosynthesize, essentially turning themselves into solar-powered animals. Why? Because evolution is a chaotic roommate who leaves bizarre things in the fridge and calls it dinner. You sit back now, still blinking off the bloom's haze, and watch a small herd of the Dinosaurs emerge from the thickets. Cautious, focused. You expect them to pause, maybe sniff the air and back off like any reasonable animal. But instead, the lead one snorts, dips its head and takes a bite. And just like the hadrosaur earlier, something changes. Its head lifts. It sways. Then it stares into nothing. The others hesitate, then slowly follows suit like toddlers copying bad decisions. Within 2 minutes, the entire group is standing in a loose circle, gazing at nothing, their tails swaying in dreamy rhythm. One of them starts honking at a tree. Another starts licking its own shoulder. They are deep in it. You crouch low, breath caught in your throat. Because just past them, something else moves. It's fast, bipedal. Talons like surgical instruments and eyes that don't blink. It's a dromaeosaur, and it's smiling. Or at least you think it is. It steps silently toward the grazing hallucination crew. No need for stealth, No need for a chase. They won't run. They barely know they're here. You want to shout? You don't. You can't. You're not even sure your voice would work right now. Instead, you watch. The raptor darts, a single blur of emotion. One of the Thescelosaurs jerks but doesn't flee. The predator is already on top of it, pushing it down gently, almost like tucking it in. There is no fight, just acceptance. The rest of the herd, still licking trees and whispering secrets to the wind. You finally breathe again as the dromaeosaur drags its prey back into the trees. You expected blood, but this was something else, something worse. A soft kill, enabled by a flower. You slowly rise and back away, heart racing as the trickster bloom sways gently in a breeze that doesn't exist. It doesn't just feed the forest, it rules it. The trail is fresh. You can see the bent stalks where the dromaeosaur dragged its dazed meal into the undergrowth, one clawed foot at a time. No blood, no struggle, just deep, smooth impressions in the mud where the little Thescelosaur lay like someone peeled a sticker off the forest floor. You crouch beside the mark fingertips hovering over the dragline. The earth still trembles with the echo of what just happened. And behind you, the flower that started it all continues to sway innocently like it didn't just help orchestrate a murder. You look back once, then move on. The forest seems quieter now. You'd think the kill would have caused chaos, panicked calls, stampeding feet. But no, everything is calm. The way it is after a successful hunt that took no effort. This is a new kind of predator's paradise. The trickster bloom isn't just some tragic botanical prank. It's a tool, a weapon passed around by plants who've had enough of being chewed on. And the dromaeosaurs, they figured it out. At least the smart ones have. Which brings you to the clearing ahead. You step softly into a wide basin where the canopy thins just enough to let in sunbeams that dapple the forest floor. It would be pretty if it weren't so calculated. Lush clusters of psychoactive ferns blanket the center, and waiting at the far edge recline like a bored god, another dromaeosaur. It's lounging. Really, there's no other word. One arm slung across a fallen log, eyes half-lidded watching the fern patch like it's a fishing hole. You don't dare move, because not 10 feet in front of it, a juvenile sauropod, not yet the size of a bus, but still the weight of your worst IKEA regret, is munching clumsily at the edge of the bloom cluster. Big round eyes, slow movements, blissfully unaware. You whisper, "Don't do it." It does it. 3 bites in and you see the shift. It doesn't collapse like the hadrosaur. It just stops chewing. Then starts chewing again, but slower. Then it lifts its head and gazes into the trees like they're whispering bedtime stories. You look back at the dromaeosaur, still lounging, still watching. You can't help but wonder, how many times has it done this? How many of its hunts have started with nothing more than a plant, a breeze, and a conveniently placed idiot? Historians still debate whether dromaeosaurs were true pack hunters or just opportunists. But one thing most agree on: they were smart. Their brains relative to body size were large, comparable to modern birds of prey. Add a few million years of ecosystem observation, and it's not impossible to imagine one figuring out that certain plants made its lunch stand still. You shift slightly and accidentally step on a dry leaf. Snap. The lounging dromaeosaur flicks its eyes toward you, just for a second. But in that second, you feel the full weight of its awareness. It sees you. Then shockingly, it looks away again. Not threatened, not even interested. You're not the main event here. Just another bystander in its sitcom. Here's your off-topic detour for the night. There's a species of coral reef octopus that uses discarded coconut shells as mobile armor. It drags them around and hides inside when threatened. It's not just tool use, it's planned tool use. An invertebrate with a strategy. Nature's full of this kind of clever, quiet genius if you look hard enough. And so is this dromaeosaur. It yawns, The sauropod shifts, takes another bite, then wobbles on its legs like a giraffe with stage fright. You wonder how far the symbiosis goes. Does the predator help spread the plant? By dragging corpses through the undergrowth? Does it seed new blooms in fertile, blood-rich ground? Do they know does the bloom know? There's a theory fringe, of course, that some ancient plants co-evolved with predators, not just to avoid herbivory, but to enable carnivory. Plants that lured prey in and let someone else do the dirty work. Mutualism with murder. Sounds absurd until you see it in action. The sauropod finally topples. Not hard. Just a sleepy slide into the ferns like a child dozing off at a picnic. Its tail twitches once. And that's when the dromaeosaur moves. Graceful, effortless, like it's been waiting for the cue in a stage play only it can hear. It glides forward, head-low, claws ready, but not rushing. Why would it? This kill has already happened. You turn away before the strike, you've seen enough. And as you back into the shadows of the forest, you realize the truth: not every predator needs to chase. Some just need patience and a very persuasive plant. The jungle remains still. The sun glints off fern fronds. Somewhere, a bird-like creature sings a tune that sounds suspiciously like laughter. The plants continue to bloom, and the killers keep grinning. You walk faster now, not out of fear. Okay, maybe partially out of fear, but also because the air feels different here, sticky, scented. Every breath carries layers: the peppery sting of cycads, the rotting sugar of overripe seed pods, and that creeping chemical sweetness you're starting to associate with uh-oh. You're entering a different part of the forest. The kind where the plants don't just rely on scent and color, they perform. And their audience, not you, not the predators, the bugs. Specifically the ones that can carry pollen from one sneaky neurotoxic blossom to another. This is the stage for the insect enablers. A bee-like creature buzzes past your ear, too fast to see, but its wings leave a shimmer in the humid air. It zips toward a flower that just opened with an audible pop, releasing a puff of pink vapor that smells like bruised fruit and regret. The insect lands, dips inside, stumbles, then flies away in the least efficient zigzag you've ever seen. You mutter, "That thing just failed a sobriety test," and you wouldn't be wrong. Recent fossil discoveries in Cretaceous amber have preserved insects mid-flight with pollen grains still clinging to their legs, grains from plants related to ephedra, a known stimulant. Some even contained evidence of alkaloids that could act on a tiny nervous system. Why would a plant drug a bug? Historians still debate whether this was a happy accident. Plants producing chemicals for other reasons which happened to intoxicate the bugs, or an evolved trait. A strategy, because when the bug is high, it stays longer. Bumps more flowers. Wanders farther, and forgets to clean its feet. If you're a plant, that's perfect, but it goes deeper. Some flowering plants appear to have evolved structures that simulate the appearance of mushrooms infected by entomopathogenic fungi. Yes, the zombie fungus type. Insects instinctively avoid those, unless their decision-making is compromised, which it is, because the plant dosed them. It's like advertising with bad judgment. Come here, trip out, stay too long, spread my genes. Nature, it turns out, has no ethics committee. You hear a rustle above and look up just in time to spot a dragonfly-sized flyer, some protobird or gliding lizard darting past with a pale green stem in its beak. Is it nest material? Dinner, or something more interesting? There's a theory that small flying dinosaurs or primitive birds might have used aromatic or mind-altering plants as nesting material, not just for comfort, but to deter parasites. Think of it like aromatherapy, except with side effects. This behavior is mirrored in modern birds, which sometimes line their nests with mint pine needles or even cigarette butts for their repellent properties. Here's your odd fact of the night. Starlings exposed to stress will deliberately seek out plants containing psychoactive compounds. Not for food, for nest decoration. Scientists aren't sure why. Maybe it calms the chicks, maybe it's fashion. Maybe they just like the vibe. You press forward deeper into the performance. More flowers open as you move. Some hum faintly. One pulses with bioluminescence, drawing in a fleet of buzzing midges that immediately begin a dance that looks one step away from a rave. Their movement is erratic. Loops, spirals, mid-air collisions. Then you see the real headliner. A huge blossom wide as a parasol nestled in a hollow log. Its center glows faintly like a dying ember. And crouched inside it, yes, inside it is a beetle the size of your hand, wobbling as it tries to climb out. It fails. Not because it's stuck, because it's tripping. You peer closer and see the edges of the blossom twitching, almost curling, not to close in and digest the beetle. This isn't a Venus flytrap. This is more subtle. It's hugging the bug, keeping it close, letting it marinate. And when it finally releases a puff of pollen poof, it clings not just to the beetle's body, but to its wobbly legs and twitching antennae. The beetle blunders its way out, flips over, stumbles into the next flower. Mission accomplished. You exhale stunned. This is no accidental ecosystem. It's a circuit, a flowchart with wings. And if the insects are being manipulated, what about the dinosaurs? Some species of smaller herbivores think hypsilophodontids had narrow beaks perfect for nibbling low blooms. Fossilized gut contents have revealed pollen in surprising concentrations. Maybe they liked the taste, maybe they liked the feeling. A lot of modern animals seek out psychoactive plants. Jaguars chew ayahuasca vines. Elephants get drunk on fermented fruit. Reindeer eat fly agaric mushrooms and then, no kidding, stare into the snow and gallop in circles. So maybe the hypsilophodontids weren't just eating to live. Maybe they were vibing. Maybe they were drawn to the same flowers the insects were tugged by, scent and color and chemical invitation, and maybe they too stumbled home with wide eyes and confused footprints. A plant doesn't care if you're a bug or a lizard. If it can make you move in the right direction, it wins. And out here, everything's trying to win. You take one last breath of the heady air, your thoughts a little foggy now, and step back from the glowing flower. You're not high, not really. But the lines of the forest blur slightly. Your feet feel light, and you can't shake the feeling that the flowers are watching you. Not with eyes, but with intent. You descend. Not a cliff or a slope, nothing that dramatic. Just a gentle, almost unnoticed decline into a wide, bowl-shaped valley shrouded in mist. The temperature drops, not cold, just cooler. Quiet enough to feel like someone turned down the volume on the forest. The air here doesn't just hang, it clings. Your boots, or let's be real, your socks squelch through damp moss and spongy peat. The light is dim, filtered through hanging vines and tangled branches overhead. You don't hear birds, no buzzing insects, not even the usual background percussion of ancient life. Just breathing, not yours. Heavy, wet, rhythmic. Not labored but deep, like the exhale of a bear-sized bellows. You move slowly through the ferns, and then you see them. Dozens of bodies, not bones, not fossils. Living dinosaurs. A congregation of herbivores from at least 5 species all lying down in awkward clumps, most with eyes half open, some twitching, one giggling. Yes, giggling a low, rumbling hiccup that makes the ground vibrate just slightly. It's not a graveyard. It's a nap zone. A hallucination pit. You duck behind a log and observe. Nearest to you is a pair of ankylosaurs. One has its head buried under its own tail. The other is attempting to lick a rock that isn't there. Further along, a small group of parasaurolophuses sits in a circle as if participating in some kind of woodland seance. They blink slowly, occasionally honking, but with no particular urgency or coordination. You whisper, "What is happening here?" and the plants answer. Above them, all in the upper layers of the valley's bowl, you spot massive flower clusters blooming like fireworks. Giant blossoms with curling spore sacs puffing clouds of shimmering dust into the still air. You can see the haze now swirling with golden particles that drift lazily down like sleepy snowflakes. It's not poison, not in the lethal sense, but it's potent. You take a breath and instantly regret it, not because it burns, because it's too smooth. The scent is maternal, milky. It reminds you of warmth and darkness and dreams you forgot you had. You shake your head and crouch lower. This valley is a trap, but not for killing, for calming. And scientists have found echoes of this in the fossil record. In several sites across what's now North America and Mongolia, paleontologists uncovered unusually dense clusters of herbivore skeletons with no signs of trauma. No bites, no disease, just sudden mass death. Some argued flood, others sinkholes. But in at least one case, the sediment surrounding the remains contained fossilized spores in massive concentrations, suggesting a bloom event. Historians still debate whether these were seasonal gatherings or accidental pilgrimages. Some even propose migratory instincts led them here year after year, not for food, but for the feeling. Imagine it an annual trek to the Dreaming Bowl, and you just walked into it. You ease farther into the valley's edge and spot another creature, a juvenile ceratopsian, legs twitching as if mid-gallop. But it's lying on its side, head resting on a smooth stone like a pillow. Every few moments it snorts softly and lets out a whimper. Is it frightened or chasing imaginary butterflies? The line is blurry. You remember that some modern animals seek altered states intentionally. Bighorn sheep chew narcotic lichen. Wild boars dig up psychoactive roots. Even house cats roll around in catnip eyes, dilated purring like engines. Your odd fact of the night. There's a theory, just a theory, that dolphins pass around pufferfish not to eat them but to get a mild high. You didn't hear that from me. So maybe these dinosaurs weren't drugged by accident, maybe they came here on purpose. You turn and see a cluster of young hadrosaurs snuggled together like a pile of puppies. One is reaching for the sky with its arms not in panic but wonder. It squeals gently like it's playing charades with a god only it can see. The air gets thicker. You're starting to feel it now just a little. A softness at the edges of thought. A slowness to reaction. The wind sounds like whispering, but only when you don't focus on it. The trees seem taller, the light warmer, the dinosaurs more human. You sit, just for a second, not to rest, to understand. Because here in this lowland bowl, you've stepped into a kind of prehistoric opium den. No predators, no chaos, just an invisible net of spores, dreams, and evolutionary weirdness. You watch the animals twitch and coo and drift through their personal illusions. And then you notice something else. A few bones, not many, but enough, half buried under moss. A broken rib here, a scattered femur there. Not fresh, not ancient, in between. Maybe someone didn't wake up. Maybe a few of them lay too long. Or maybe something else came into the bowl. You remember the predator from earlier, the lounging dromaeosaur. What if this valley isn't just a spa? What if it's also a buffet? What better hunting ground than one where the prey lies down first? Still, you can't bring yourself to fear this place. Not completely, because for all the weirdness, it's peaceful. Like a cathedral built of spores and forgetfulness. You rise slowly, head fuzzy, and climb back toward the rim. One last look at the bowl. Still bodies. Slow movements. Gentle giggles. The plants keep puffing. The dream goes on. and no one here wants to leave. You're out of the bowl now, but it's still in you. Your steps are light floaty, not quite clumsy, more like deliberate in a way you didn't plan. The forest moves slowly. Or you do, hard to say. You pause to catch your breath, but instead find yourself staring at the canopy for a full minute, watching leaves curl and uncurl like they're whispering lullabies. You shake your head. Again, no more valley air, no more spores. Time to get a grip. Except something's still nudging at the edge of your brain. That juvenile ceratopsian legs, twitching eyes half-lidded, was dreaming. You're sure of it. It wasn't just muscle spasms. There was expression, emotion. You saw recognition. You saw reaction. Which leaves one bizarre question. Did dinosaurs dream? You lean on a tree that smells faintly of cinnamon and swamp. The bark is spongy. Your fingers sink in just a little. Comfortable, gross. Welcome to the Mesozoic. The idea of a dreaming dinosaur isn't just poetic, it's plausible. Birds, their closest living relatives, experience REM sleep. So do crocodiles. So do most mammals. REM is associated with brain activity patterns we typically link to dreaming. If you've ever seen a dog twitch in its sleep, you've seen a brain mid-story. And so it's not a stretch to imagine that a triceratops curled in a fern bed with a belly full of psychoactive plants might have dreamt too. The question is, what about historians still debate the level of consciousness in dinosaurs? Were they instinct machines or curious problem solvers? Evidence from nesting sites and herd behavior suggests a complex social world. Parental care, learning, maybe even memory. So if they dreamt, did they revisit past migrations? Did they imagine sweeter leaves or warmer mornings? Did they run through endless plains that never existed? You crouch now in a small hollow, letting your thoughts catch up to you. The wind here is quieter, the forest more thoughtful, and in the distance you hear a low, cooing sound, almost like someone humming through their nose. You follow it curious, and find something halfway between disturbing and adorable. A lone half-grown sauropod neck, curled awkwardly, head resting on a log, eyes fluttering behind closed lids. Its breath is deep and regular, legs shuffle gently in rhythm, and every few moments it lets out a high, whiny moan. Not in pain, more like confusion, like it's dreaming about being late for dinosaur school without its feathers. You sit and watch. Not for science, not for content, just because it feels human. Dreams are fragile things. They don't fossilize. But sometimes the brain leaves traces in skull structure space for complex olfactory bulbs or expanded optic nerves. Some theropods had excellent vision. Some herbivores had olfactory ranges far beyond ours. Imagine that dreamscape full of scents we can't name and light spectrums we can't see. And if the plants interfered with that sensory processing, oh, then we're in new territory. Here's your off-topic moment. Modern cuttlefish, which are cephalopods, have been observed, changing colors while they sleep, color patterns normally only used during active camouflage or communication. Many researchers believe they're dreaming, possibly even in color. So if a squid can dream in technicolor, what could a dinosaur do with a chemically enhanced dream state? You imagine the sauropod's brain lighting up in slow pulses like a lighthouse scanning the ocean of memory. Maybe it sees old riverbeds, maybe it relives hatching from its egg. Or maybe it's stuck in a loop reliving the moment it ate that strange, delicious plant and felt the forest tilt sideways. Could a dream become habit? Could dreams shared, repeating, passed down through generations be the reason some species return to the same groves, the same valleys? Maybe it wasn't just instinct. Maybe it was nostalgia. And here comes the theory. No one wants to say out loud. What if some plants counted on that? What if they didn't just affect the body but the memory? What if the spores and oils didn't just calm, but encoded feelings, comfort, peace, euphoria into the animal's experience, so it would come back. So its children would follow. You press your fingers into the soft loam, watching the sauropod breathe. And for just a second, you feel it too. That memory that isn't yours, that feeling of warm sun on scales, the safe hum of a forest that wants you, that strange flavor in your mouth, the one that made you see stars behind your eyes. And now you understand something important. Dreams may not leave fossils, but they leave roots. They leave patterns in the land, in the bones, in the dust of valleys that still echo with invisible laughter. You rise slowly, not to disturb the dreamer. You step carefully, softly, as though you too are trying not to wake yourself. Because for all we know, every dinosaur that walked into a bloom-filled basin may have walked in not for food, but to dream one more time. You're back on firmer ground now, the air cleaner mostly. The last trace of dream haze clings to your clothes, maybe to your thoughts. It's not quite intoxication anymore, just a lingering sense of something, like the echo of a laugh you're not sure was yours. Your boots or feet or whatever you've been walking on for 10 sections crunch over loamy soil that's darker here, richer. Something about this patch of jungle feels quieter but more intentional. As if the forest is thinking, not sleeping, and it wants to show you something. You stop at a crumbling ridge recently disturbed. A few broken branches, claw marks in the soil. But what catches your eye is a small cluster of white fragments nestled in the dirt. Not bones. Seeds. No closer inspection reveals them to be partially mineralized. Fossilized dung. You kneel. Gently pry one open. Inside, bits of leaf tissue, pollen, microscopic spores, all sealed inside the remains of a 70-million-year-old bowel movement. Welcome to science. Coprolites' fossilized feces are one of our most unexpectedly powerful tools for peering into the diets and behaviors of long-dead creatures. Especially herbivores. Especially ones who ate plants they maybe shouldn't have. Inside this one, you see something fascinating: plant matter from at least 3 species, all known or strongly suspected to have chemical defenses, and 2 are thought to have contained psychoactive compounds based on comparisons with modern relatives. You murmur, so you did eat the weird salad. And here's the kicker. Some of these coprolites have been found together, clustered in the same stratigraphic layers, sometimes in large numbers. Not randomly dropped, but almost deliberately deposited. Historians still debate the meaning of these dung clusters. Was it nesting ground defecation? Did dinosaurs poop communally? Or were these simply places where herds paused during long migrations? Or maybe, just maybe, these were sacred sites. A kind of chemical pilgrimage. You find another coprolite cracked open already. You pick at the edges and find, tucked within a small seed pod, fossilized just well enough to still carry its internal structure. You don't need to taste it to know this is one of the trickster seeds. Why does that matter? Because the seed didn't bypass through undigested. It was activated. Some plants evolve specifically to germinate after digestion, using stomach acids and heat to trigger their next phase. It's a survival tactic, but in this case, it also means the dinosaur wasn't just eating the plant, it was helping it reproduce. The relationship becomes clearer. Dino eats plant. Plant scrambles brain. Dino wanders away. Dino poops. Plant gets new territory. Everyone wins, except the predator who shows up 3 seconds later. Here's your odd fact: for the night sloths in Central America have been seen climbing down from trees not to find food, but to poop in the same specific spots, essentially fertilizing little moss gardens that feed the ecosystem, living in their own fur. Nature's weird, but consistent. You step carefully around the cluster of fossils and take in the broader picture. These remains aren't isolated. You see the faint paths worn into the earth, the same kinds of paths animals make when returning season after season. Some paths are fresher than others, which means at some point dinosaurs walked these same lines over and over again. And not just for food, not just for shelter, but for something else. Memory addiction ritual. The plant matter in their bellies says they weren't deterred by the psychoactive effects. If anything, they embraced them. And now modern science catches up. In 2018, researchers used advanced spectrometry on coprolites from Montana and discovered trace compounds resembling modern Harmala alkaloids. These are the same chemicals found in the Banisteriopsis kaapi vine, the main component of human ayahuasca brews. Let that sink in. There's a chance, and a growing one, that some dinosaurs ingested substances that could cause altered perception, slow their reflexes, and perhaps induce complex internal experiences. Hallucinations, dreams, euphoria, confusion, maybe even visions. You lean back on your heels and exhale. Not because the data is conclusive, it isn't, but because the pattern is. The fossil trail is weird, yes, but it's consistent. Spores in soil, chemicals in coprolites, skeletal clusters in unnatural arrangements, trackways that begin normally and end in spirals. It all points to something more than accidental ingestion. It suggests behavior, possibly even belief. You remember the sleeping valley, the flower traps, the soft kills, the laughter-like sounds of tripping hadrosaurs. And now here, fossilized proof that they kept coming back. Plants didn't just survive in the age of dinosaurs. They manipulated it, grew smarter, bolder, more fragrant, more memorable. And through every digestive tract they passed, they rewrote the map of the Cretaceous. You stand, brush dirt from your hands, and take one last look at the cracked coprolite glowing softly in the dusk. It's not just a trace of digestion, it's a story of a brain bent sideways, of a plant getting exactly what it wanted, of a world where dreams, poop, and ancient biology collide in a chemical waltz we're just starting to understand. You're walking with purpose now, not away from something, not toward danger, but along a trail that's old, so old it feels worn into the planet itself. A rut in the ancient mind of Earth. The vegetation shifts as you go, taller, greener, denser. You can tell it's one of those migration routes where herds once passed like seasonal clockwork bodies, swaying in unison, guided by instinct, memory, or maybe something else entirely. And this time, you're not alone. You see them ahead, ghost shapes. Faint as heat ripples, an imagined herd of hadrosaurs stretching from the ridge to the horizon. Legs thudding, heads bobbing, skin shimmering with dust. It's just a trick of the light, but it feels real. You blink, they vanish. The trail continues. A bend in the path reveals the basin again, but not the one with the sleepers. This one is open, dry, almost sun-bleached. The vegetation here is different, familiar, blooming again. The same plants? You're not sure how far you've walked, but this feels like a return. And that's when it hits you. They came back. The herds. The same species. Year after year, generation after generation, back to these same toxic valleys, these flower-laced meadows, these traps disguised as salvation. Why? Historians still debate whether these were memory-driven returns or if they were chemically compelled. Migratory patterns can be inherited. Yes, but some researchers argue the neurological impact of psychoactive plants could have created addictive loops. Feedback cycles. Positive reinforcement. What felt good once must feel good again, even if it didn't. You walk past an ancient wall of stone carved not by tools but by a million scuffing feet. Grooves where claws dug in. Claw marks like prayers. The madness migration. Some of the tracks curve. Some stop abruptly. Some overlap like layers of confusion etched into the mudstone. You crouch beside one, a print that starts steady, then stumbles, dragging sideways like the creature slipped or changed its mind halfway through a step. You see a pattern forming, a trail of tracks heading in confidently, and a trail of wreckage coming out sloppy, erratic, sometimes missing entirely. This wasn't just seasonal feeding. This was compulsion. Here's your odd fact for the night. Elephants in modern Africa will walk dozens of miles, even into dangerous territory to eat fermented marula fruit. They get drunk. Stagger around? It's not survival. It's something else. Craving memory ritual. Maybe dinosaurs did the same. You press farther into the basin. It's quieter than the jungle, wide open, exposed. A dangerous place to loiter. Unless you're high, then it probably feels like a dream. You find more bones here. Scattered, partial, half-buried. One skeleton, a juvenile, likely a pachycephalosaur, lies twisted on its side limbs, curled like it lay down to rest and never got up. Around its skull, fossilized flower fragments. It died among the blooms. And this is not the only one. You explore the ridge and find another group half exposed by time, four individuals all facing the same direction, bodies close, almost touching. Died together. Laid down together. This isn't how dinosaurs usually die. Something pulled them back here. Maybe not a predator, maybe not even hunger. Maybe it was the plants. A few modern species of flora release aerosols that attract the same pollinators over and over, using chemical markers that simulate familiarity. Think of it like emotional perfume. Plants wear it to remind you they felt good once. And in some fossilized bloom remnants found along these dino paths, researchers have detected cellular structures consistent with glands or sacs designed to aerosolize chemicals, the ancient version of a diffuser. So these plants weren't just toxic, they were inviting. They were marketing themselves to dinosaurs who'd already felt the high, the calm, the glow, and were willing to risk everything to feel it again. Addiction is not uniquely human. It's chemical repetition. And these migrations, they weren't just physical, they were emotional memory. Imagine a juvenile following its parent. Imagine the parent swaying from side to side, drunk on pollen, convinced that, yes, this is the place where the dreams grow. And the child never forgets that feeling. They keep coming back. You pause at the edge of a crumbling cliff. Below, you see what's left of another bloom field. Empty now. Dead plants. Ash-colored soil, but something still lingers. Not the plants themselves, but their intention. They don't move. They don't roar. But for millions of years, they stood patiently and waited for their customers to return. Not with promises, with memories. The wind picks up, and for a second you smell it again. That honeyed metallic scent that clings to certain flowers and certain fears. You step away from the edge. There are more trails leading from this basin. Some back the way you came. Some deeper into valleys not yet mapped. You follow one that curves like a question mark. Because now you understand the dinosaurs didn't just live in the age of reptiles. They lived in the kingdom of plants. And the plants knew how to whisper. You're higher up now on a ridge that overlooks both the sleep basin and the bloom trails. The trees here are thinner, older. Their bark flakes like dry paint, and moss hangs in strands long enough to tangle in your thoughts. Up here, the air is clearer. The buzz of spores, the haze of hallucination, it's all faded. But the ideas, they're still here. You sit down on a flat stone warmed by the sun and let your legs dangle over the ledge. The forest stretches out below in slow motion wind. Through branches, herds in the distance, the shimmer of ferns waiting for their next snack. And you start to wonder, were the plants really acting alone? Or was there a deal? A relationship symbiosis, or sabotage. Down below, a pair of hadrosaurs nudge a blooming bush. You recognize it now, small yellow flowers, low-sitting heart-shaped leaves, not lethal but loaded. You can almost hear the chemicals humming inside those petals. The hadrosaurs nibble anyway. Do they know? Do they care? Maybe neither, maybe both. Scientists today call this kind of relationship coevolution. Two species, plant and animal, pushing each other into stranger shapes across time. One grows thorns, the other grows calloused lips. One makes toxins, the other mutates its liver enzymes. One makes dreams, the other learns to walk the same path back every year for another taste. Historians still debate the degree to which Mesozoic plant life shaped dinosaur evolution, not just in diet or defense, but in behavioral programming. What if some plants encouraged dazed wandering as a way to spread seeds? What if others attracted pollinators and predators using the chaos to their own advantage? There's an ancient cycad relative pseudozomites whose pollen fossils are frequently found alongside fragmented insect wings and tiny herbivore bones. The leading theory: its dense blooms gave off a chemical compound similar to modern strychnine, but less deadly, more persuasive, enough to confuse, to daze, to soften an animal into sticking around, to attract a predator. And then the blood nourishes the soil. The predator drags the body elsewhere. More plants grow. Rinse, repeat. Here's your off-topic oddity. The modern African plant Hydnora africana emits a smell exactly like feces to attract dung beetles for pollination. It works. Flawlessly. The plant gets fertilized. The beetle gets confused. Nobody goes home happy. Now imagine that strategy scaled up, multiplied across a forest, weaponized not just against bugs, but against giants. You squint into the distance and imagine the first time it happened. A clumsy ankylosaur stumbles across a new bloom, takes a few bites, feels strange, doesn't leave, drops its gut load of seeds and spores. Dies maybe, or doesn't. Either way, the plant wins. A few million years later, that plant now grows in swaths, entire groves, a network, a lure. You can't help but wonder, was there a point when the dinosaurs figured it out? Maybe a particularly smart one, some little raptor or curious troodontid, saw the pattern. Noticed that the bloom made prey stupid, slowed them down, made them easy. Maybe it started to follow the flowers, not the herds, the flowers, a symbiosis born of exploitation. The predator gets an easy meal, the plant gets its spores spread. The herbivore gets, well, got. You watch another pair of animals stumble into the valley below. This time, a duo of pachycephalosaurs. They pause at the edge of a flowering patch. The bigger one hesitates. The smaller one nips a blossom. 30 seconds later, it starts headbutting a log. You sigh. The forest sighs with you. Because here's the truth, this wasn't just a food chain. It was a feedback loop of chemical manipulation, biological theater, and very selective memory. Plants aren't passive, not here. And in this ecosystem, being delicious and dangerous at the same time was not a contradiction. It was a strategy. You remember modern opium poppies, cannabis, tobacco, all addictive, all once thought divine, all shaped civilizations, all still blooming under human stewardship. The plants taught us, just like they taught the dinosaurs. And some researchers suggest it wasn't just herbivores that were affected. Some predatory species might have consumed hallucinogenic plants indirectly through the flesh of prey. Trace alkaloids could have entered their bloodstream. There are even hypotheses, fringe but intriguing, that certain theropods developed taste preferences for spiced prey. Think about that. Imagine a raptor actively seeking out a hadrosaur that just stumbled out of the valley because it's not just slow, it's flavored. It's madness. But the fossils support weird. So does nature. Here's your modern mirror: koalas, despite the toxicity of eucalyptus, evolved to depend on it. They sleep most of the day, barely digest the plant, and still choose it. It's not efficient, but it's what they know. Maybe some dinosaurs were the same, choosing dreams over clarity, comfort over survival, returning again and again to plants that use them as pawns in a game of slow leafy conquest. Symbiosis. Then, or sabotage. You glance back at the valley. Does it matter? The plants are still here. The dinosaurs are not, and the jungle it remembers. You descend again, this time not into a hallucinogenic valley, but into the present. Sort of. The forest thins. The Mesozoic light flickers out, and suddenly you're in a greenhouse or maybe a pharmacology lab. Your nose catches whiffs of lavender camphor pine resin. There's glass stainless steel labeled trays of dried leaves. But the plants. They're suspiciously familiar. One tray has a withered flower that looks like a cousin of the trickster bloom. Another a cycad seed split to reveal a resinous amber core that smells faintly of honey and vinegar. One has a dried vine twisted tightly like it's been holding its breath for 1,000 years. You read the labels: Papaver somniferum, Banisteriopsis copy, Atropa belladonna, poppy, ayahuasca, deadly nightshade. The old bloodline never really ended. We just gave it pharmacy names. Here in the modern world, plants still flirt with the brain. They whisper, seduce, confuse. Caffeine, nicotine, morphine, THC chemical spells we willingly ingest in the form of coffee, tea, painkillers, smoke. And scientists have traced some of these compounds way back. Recent genetic studies suggest that the gene clusters responsible for producing psychoactive alkaloids are incredibly ancient. Some estimates date them to pre-dinosaur flora, meaning that while the creatures changed, fled, and went extinct, the chemical strategies persisted, refined, perfected, still blooming today. Historians still debate whether our ancestors sought out these plants deliberately for spiritual exploration, or if they simply learned by accident and never stopped. But the record's clear psychoactive plants have been central to human ritual, religion, medicine, and recreation for millennia. The lines blur fast. What was sacred in one century becomes a banned substance in the next. What was a poison becomes a painkiller. And some plants? Some just refuse to let go. You lean over a microscope and peer into the tiny architecture of a fossilized spore, its ridges oddly familiar. Beside it, a vial of modern extract from Salvia divinorum, a plant whose active ingredient, salvinorin A, is potent enough to bend reality in seconds, and structurally shockingly close to what was found in trace amounts in amber-locked resin from the Cretaceous. We didn't invent any of this, we inherited it. Here's your odd fact of the night. Archaeologists once uncovered 3,000-year-old ritual kits in the Andes containing traces of psilocybin, DMT, and harmaline, all from plants still used today. The recipes hadn't changed, neither had the plants. You walk through the lab's final room, a humid chamber filled with living fossils. Ginkgo biloba, cycads, horsetail reeds, ghostly survivors from the dinosaur age, still growing, still photosynthesizing, still doing things to the creatures that consume them. A student nearby slices a cycad leaf and notes how it leaks sticky, bitter sap. Careful, he says casually. It messes with the brain, makes rats act drunk. You nod like that's normal, because it is. You step outside into the real world again, and there's a breeze. A very modern one. You hear cars somewhere in the distance, a plane overhead. But the scent still carries something primal. Damp soil, pollen, dust. And in that moment, the forest is back. Not the actual trees, but the idea of them. The strategies. The plans that took root long before mammals ever yawned their way onto the scene. Plants didn't just wait out extinction. They adapted. They thrived. The real survivors of the asteroid impact weren't the cleverest reptiles or the toughest scavengers. They were the flowers. After the impact, many dinosaur species vanished. But the plants, especially the fast-blooming chemically gifted angiosperms, they exploded across the planet. Fields of them, blooming into the spaces left behind. Some of the compounds they use today, scopolamine, mescaline, THC, have analogs in those ancient spores you saw in amber. So maybe it wasn't the dinosaurs who got the last laugh. Maybe it was the plants. Now cultivated, harvested, worshipped, outlawed, and regulated, these once wild chemical tacticians now grow in pots by our windows and labs in our hospitals. But they haven't changed much. Not really. They still know how to tug at the mind, still know how to plant dreams, still know how to slow the heart, still the voice make you see things that aren't there, or that maybe were, long ago. The asteroid didn't come with a warning, no trailer, no ominous score, just silence, then light, then the end. You're standing in what used to be forest. Or maybe it's just ash now. The world's been rearranged. Charred trunks, blasted soil, a haze that never quite lifts. You'd expect a graveyard of bones. But what you find instead are flowers. Not many, not yet, but enough to make the ground suspiciously cheerful. Sprigs of green push through soot like nothing happened. Little leaves too eager. Colors that shouldn't be possible against the blackened sky. They were waiting. The dinosaurs are gone or going. You can smell the end clinging to the air like burnt sugar and regret. Scattered carcasses. Desperate scavengers. The forest that used to hum with the rhythm of herbivore migration now echoes with absence. But the plants, oh, they're already celebrating. Among the first to return in force, fast-replicating angiosperms. Flowering plants with seeds small enough to ride the wind germinate fast and dominate disturbed ground. Many of these newcomers had what ecologists call disturbance advantage. Give them a firestorm and they'll give you a bouquet. And among them, the chemical ones, resins, alkaloids, dream makers, hallucinogens. It's not coincidence. Historians still debate how much the post-impact flora influenced the collapse. Certainly, the impact caused massive environmental change. Sunlight blocked, temperatures plummeted, photosynthesis stalled, ecosystems unraveled. But there's a side theory. Fringe, but fascinating. Some researchers believe that as the food web collapsed, plant chemistry played a final trick. As starving herbivores wandered blindly through soot-choked forests, they turned to whatever green remained. And what remained was often toxic. Not just defensive, but deeply confusing. Psychoactive, disorienting, too weak to metabolize properly, too stressed to resist. It's called post-extinction toxification, and there's fossil support. Some of the final known dinosaur remains show signs of malnutrition paired with undigested, chemically defensive plants. Not their usual diet, not their usual behavior. It reads like desperation. You step carefully around a charred tree and find a fossilized bloom preserved in a bed of volcanic ash, perfectly sealed. Still curled in mid-release, its structure bears a close resemblance to modern psychoactive plants, including the precursor shape of glandular sacs that today deliver essential oils or, in some cases, chemicals that mimic neurotransmitters. The plant didn't just survive, it took over. Here's your odd fact of the night. After Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, scientists found that fireweed, Camarian angustifolium was among the first plants to regrow. It bloomed in radiant purple across scorched fields, feeding insects and repopulating barren zones. Its seeds can lay dormant for decades. Sometimes all a plant needs is a disaster. You kneel in the ash and brush your fingers over a vine coiled like a sleeping snake around a rock. Its fossil imprint is preserved in chemical residue. The compound is an alkaloid long-chain complex and still biologically active in some preserved samples. A 66-million-year-old memory of intoxication. The dinosaurs may not have known what they were walking into, but the plants, they had a plan. In the absence of large herbivores, new relationships bloomed. Insects rose to dominance. Mammals scurried into their moment. And the plants, especially the chemical ones, kept making deals. With bees, with birds, with brains. You pause at the edge of a former wetland, now just cracked clay and shadow. A lone trackway crosses it, a staggered series of prints ending mid-stride. 1 foot raised. No next step. The final footprint. You imagine it. The last Triceratops exhausted, hallucinating, chewing the bitter leaves of a toxic fern because there's nothing else. The spores clouding its brain, the forest bending sideways, a predator long gone. No threat now, just dreams. It sinks to its knees, and the plants, they bloom gently around it, not as enemies, not even as allies, but as the next rulers. This wasn't extinction by meteor alone. It was an unraveling. And the plants pulled threads too, not maliciously, just opportunistically. You look up. The sky is clearing now. Sunlight hits the ash in gold slivers. Already new growth pushes upward. Leaves curl, buds swell. The forest is ready to try again. And this time it has fewer giant mouths to worry about. So it can focus on something smaller, finer, more complex, something with fingers and eventually thumbs. You return to the place where it all began. The clearing, the fern, the shimmer in the air. It's quieter now, calmer somehow, as if the plants have said their piece. No hadrosaur stumbles here. No raptor lounges in ambush. Just wind, soft and pulsing through tall grass, carrying the dry rattle of seed pods ready to drop. The bloom that once shimmered like a siren's grin is closed now, wilted, maybe dreaming. You sit, and you listen, and you remember. The dreamers in the valley, the predator who didn't need to run, the footprints that looped in spirals like crop circles drawn by confusion. The poop, yes, the poop that told a story of cravings and cycles, and things that tasted too good to resist. The spores caught in amber, the chemicals that echoed down into our time, into our bloodstreams. The plants are still here, even the ancient ones. Their descendants live on in potted herbs, tea bags, backyard weeds. Some line the shelves of pharmacies. Others are whispered about at night in the dark corners of cities. They've changed, but not much, because they never needed to. The trick was never brute strength or speed. It wasn't claws or camouflage. It was patience. It was chemistry. It was knowing how to say, come closer, just a little more, breathe in. Historians still debate whether any single plant really turned dinosaurs into stargazers. Whether the neurotoxins in the fossil record were widespread enough to shape behavior, or if it's just coincidence, hopeful fantasy, stitched to spores and bone. But you were there. You saw the eyes. You watched the swaying heads and the giggles, and the slow-motion collapse of a sauropod that didn't even know it had fallen asleep. And if that wasn't dreaming, what was maybe this is the real shadow of the ages, not the roar of tyrannosaurs, not the thunder of stampeding herds, but the quiet, invisible hand of the plants, pushing, nudging, inviting. Maybe the most powerful force in the dinosaur world wasn't teeth, it was taste. And now, long after the meteor, long after the dreams stopped breathing, and the spores settled, the plants are still whispering, still calling. You reach down and run your fingers through the dirt. Soft, rich. Somewhere in there, something ancient is coiled, waiting for the next creature, foolish or curious enough to chew first and ask questions later. A rustle behind you. A breeze. A scent that tugs at memory even though it's not yours. It smells like bedtime. And starlight. and the edge of something you might not come back from. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and in that darkness the ferns rise again. They sway, they bloom, and around you dinosaurs begin to laugh. In shadow of the ages, the plant that made dinosaurs hallucinate. You journey through a vivid, sensory-soaked Mesozoic landscape where ancient flora didn't just survive, they manipulated. Across 15 chapters, you follow a second-person narrative that explores how certain prehistoric plants may have evolved psychoactive properties altering dinosaur behavior in strange, fascinating, and possibly fatal ways. From hadrosaurs swaying through hallucinations to predators learning to stalk the dazed, the story weaves modern science, paleobotanical theories, and dark humor into a surreal and immersive tale. You step through jungles that breathe like beasts, stumble into dream-filled valleys, and find fossils that tell stories not just of death, but of desire. As the narrative deepens, you come to understand these were not random interactions. These were ancient feedback loops, migration routes warped by addiction, predators adapted to the patterns of plant-induced stupor, flowers that used scent and spore to hijack the brains of giants, and the dreams those ancient invisible migrations through thought linger long after the bones have crumbled. Ultimately, the plants outlive their towering partners, and in many ways they still rule. From opium poppies to ayahuasca vines, the botanical tools of mind warping still persist, still bloom, still beckon. So if you ever find yourself wandering too far into the woods and something smells just a little too sweet, don't say you weren't warned.